At the end of the 70s, a very young Bill Gates met an equally young Katsuhiko Nishi, and from their meetings the MSX standard was born, thanks to Nishi insight and the support of Bill Gates and Microsoft. The idea was to create compatibility among systems produced by different Japanese computer companies. The intention was, for example, to use a Sanyo computer with a Philips disk drive and a Sony printer, and of course to use the same software for all of them. The name MSX seems to be related to this feature, and is believed to be the acronym of Machines with Software Exchangeability, or at least that's what Nishi said during an interview, even if there are several interpretations of the meaning of MSX. In the same period, the Japanese Minister of Telecommunication understood that it was necessary for computer users to be able to communicate with computers and peripherals produced by different companies. That was to improve the efficiency of public offices, but even companies in general. Nishi, at that time deputy director of Microsoft Japan, was the right person at the right moment, and he managed to convince the major players in the software and hardware industry in Japan to collaborate. Companies like NEC, Fujitsu, and Hitachi had already created some variants of the Microsoft BASIC, while other companies like Panasonic, Pioneer, and Yamaha were also showing interest in the world of home computers. In addition to Japan, other international companies joined the initiative, such as Philips and Spectro Video. And it was thanks to the Spectro Video SV328 model that the first model was built, with particular attention to the number of ports available. A high number of slots would ensure versatility for computers that would be used in commercial, educational, and professional areas, but also at home. The compatibility and the collaboration among such a large number of manufacturing companies had led to a reduction in production costs. This resulted in home computers and peripherals being affordable even for an average family. The MSX standard was a huge success in Japan, where it is estimated to have sold almost 7 million units in total. Abroad, it was popular in South America, especially in Brazil and Argentina, but it was also popular in Russia. As for Europe, it had a decent spread just in some countries, such as France, Spain, and Italy. Of course, these numbers don't take into account the unauthorized clones produced in various countries in the world, and there is no way to know the actual number of these sales. But what were the minimum requirements to be considered worthy of the MSX standard? Well, first we need to divide the MSX history into generations. We can talk about the first and the second generation, which is further divided into 2, 2+, and Turbo R. In 1983, the first generation MSX was introduced to the market and was based on the Z80 processor designed by the Italian engineer Federico Faggin for Zilog. The standard specified that this computer should have a minimum of 8 KB of RAM, but most of the MSX system had 64 KB. The 32 KB RAM contained the BIOS and the MSX BASIC, while the VRAM was controlled by the processor of the TMS series of Texas Instruments and the audio chip from Yamaha or General Instrument. There were always various ports and slots, at least one for the cassette, one for the cartridges, and one or two for joysticks. Once companies adhered to the standard, they also had a certain degree of freedom, and thus models with unique features and designs were born. For example, this is an MSX1, the CF3000, which won the Design Award in Japan in 1984. Known outside Japan as Panasonic, the MSX1 computers of the national line were called King Kong in their home country, due to a famous commercial of the time. The design is indeed beautiful, with the case separated from the keyboard and the numeric keypad on the side. This model is the perfect example to showcase the manufacturer's attention to the number of slots. On the front there are 2 cartridge slots, and on the left side 2 generic ports for joystick or mouse, and a connector for the cassette player. On the back we can see the RF output, composite video, analog audio output, the keyboard connector, a printer port, and the one for the superimpose add-on unit. The superimpose capability, which became a standard in the second generation, allowed overlaying images or text on a graphic background, and this was very useful for creating video games or advanced graphic applications. The MSX standard, although very popular in Japan, arrived too late in the Western market. IBM had already launched its PC, and Commodore had successfully introduced the Commodore 64, and Apple computers were securing their market share. Despite being a global success, one of the main criticisms was the use of an outdated basic hardware compared to the latest market innovation. So the need of a more powerful hardware became obvious, leading to the production of the second generation MSX, the MSX2. In 1986, the MSX2 was released, with a more powerful video processor, increased RAM, and the superimposed capability as a standard feature. The number of ports also increased, and basic software like spreadsheets or word processing software were also introduced. Backward compatibility was maintained, allowing the use of MSX1 games and programs on the new models. Considering that 120 games have been developed for the MSX1, this was a wise decision, as a big portion of the market consisting home computers, purchased for study support but also for gaming. The CPU also needed to be compatible with the Z80, and the color choices expanded to 512, and the basic video RAM to 64 kilobytes. So the MSX2 generation enjoyed even more success than the previous one. This is an example of MSX2. The Sony Hit-Bit F5 was the first MSX2 produced by Sony in two versions, black and light gray. It featured a unique design of directional keys that would be maintained in other models. The firmware containing a personal databank that could be saved on cassette was automatically launched, and that is a feature that would persist in many models. The next model was the Sony HB-F1, released in two versions, one entirely black and one with a red part. It has some peculiarities, such as a pause button to put the system on standby and a speed controller that could be used to slow it down. The directional keys maintained the design, but were in a more current position compared to the F5 model, where they were higher and more inconvenient to reach. The reset button was missing, which was present in the previous version, the F5. Also had two cartridge slots, one on the top and one on the back, and was compatible with the addition of a disk drive. The HX34 model was the last MSX produced by Toshiba and had some unique features such as the integrated floppy disk drive and the ability to take a screenshot and send it to a printer. It had an additional copy key that, when pressed in combination with Ctrl or Ctrl-Shift, provided a printable copy of the screen. Like many versions labeled Pasopia IQ, it had a button to switch between mono and stereo audio modes. After 1986, Microsoft ceased the collaboration with the MSX standard, which had lost interest in the European market. From 1988, MSX computers were only produced by three Japanese companies, Panasonic, Sony, and Sanyo. They produced a total of 4 models of the MSX Plus generation, an upgrade from the previous generation MSX2 with great improvement in graphics and gameplay. And the new color palette contained almost 20,000 colors instead of the previous 512, and almost every MSX2 Plus computer featured the speed controller. Even when the MSX was almost completely forgotten in Europe, there was another attempt in 1990 in Japan with the launch of the MSX Turbo R. Panasonic took the initiative and brought out 2 models, the FS-A1 GT and the FS-A1 ST. The A1 ST, featuring 2 CPUs, almost 14 times faster than the previous generation. This model had an integrated firmware, and to bypass this configuration, there was a front switch instead of a dedicated button. It featured a unique system of 6 LEDs indicating the active configurations. Despite the high quality of these two models, production was entirely suspended in 1995, and that happened because IBM had already solidified its presence with the IBM compatible standard. The MSX standard is broad and fascinating, covering a wide range of models, each with its own features. The models included in this video are just a few examples of the MSX standard, not to mention the peripherals and the unique machines that I didn't have time to include in this video. So of course I plan to make more videos showcasing other interesting models. And additionally, in these days, the MSX3 was presented in Amsterdam at an official event. Of course, the technical specifications are still unknown, but I hope to provide updates in future videos.